Hello, my name is Craig Dupler and welcome to the shop. Uh, this video, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the Powermatic PM1500 and some things I learned along the way that I think will help others in one, taking the step to acquire the machine and not be intimidated by it. It really is a fantastic machine. Uh, but I know the weight and shipping issues are a bit intimidating for some people that might otherwise consider. Some of the videos online sort of stress that issue. Uh, Also, I want to get into the dust collection and how to properly set that up. The manual is terrible on this particular regard. It gives you some vague information, the flow specification requirements, but it doesn't actually tell you how to set it up. And there are several videos online specifically about this machine that have it set up wrong and aren't getting adequate dust collection. In fact, a couple commentators even mentioned that they weren't happy with that aspect. Dust collection is fantastic on this machine, but you've got to set it up right. And then there's a list of small things I've discovered about it, which I'll share, which I think will make ownership of it a lot more pleasant, and people will get more out of it than they might otherwise. This is for me giving back to the community. I watched all the videos I could find, read all the articles I could find about various bandsaws before selecting this one. They were incredibly helpful, and I learned a lot by watching other people struggle. Uh, and so when I say that somebody uh, did something that I think can be done better, that's not a criticism. They provided me a learning opportunity, and my engineering sense kicked in and said, "Hey, there's got to be a better way." And I couldn't have done that without first seeing the issues they were having. So let me just say that I am very grateful for all the information that was put out there, and I will mention several people's efforts by name. Thank you very much, and let's get started. Okay, let's talk about um, what to expect when you buy the saw and it's delivered. As you'll see in other videos about the saw that are available, um, it comes in a crate, fully enclosed, and it will be bolted to a small pallet that's the size of the crate. And depending on the carrier, it may be on top of yet another larger pallet. The small pallet is a little bit narrow for a standard pallet jack. And in transporting this from Tennessee, which is where they're dispatched from, um, it will go on and off trucks at least 3 times, perhaps as many as 4 or 5 times. And your long haul carriers, and depending on movement around uh, waypoints in between, and whoever picks it up from the factory or the distribution center in Tennessee, and then when it gets from the depot out to your shop or home, wherever you're having it delivered, it'll be on and off trucks several times. And some of the people will find it just a heck of a lot easier to set it on a second pallet, which will raise it up further. That means it's up in the air. And somehow you've got to get it from this elevated position onto a mobile base so you can roll it into your shop. Likely it will be delivered out in front on your drive or some other spot where the driver can leave it conveniently. If you're really lucky and you've got a tall shop door, you might be able to get it to drag it inside. But it won't fit in the crate on 2 pallets in most of our standard 80-inch high doors. It won't fit through the door. So you've got to get it off and on a mobile base unless you're lucky enough to have a high bay door and get them to deliver it inside. So how do you do that? Um, uh, Doug and Jill Howe down in uh, Eugene um, did a video and it showed how Doug set up a ramp and had his wife Jill uh, help him with it. And frankly, the video really scared me. And that was the one that really motivated me to come up with a better, safer solution. One that and that kicked in my engineering sense. I had a set of videos of me going through the process of unloading them, and unfortunately, I lost it. Um, but that turned out, I think you'll discover, to be an asset to this video because it forced me to set up a requirements analysis. What exactly does it have to do? What do you have to go through to make it happen safely? And I'll review those requirements with you. So let's do that requirements review next. So in addition to watching Doug's video, he and his wife Jill unload the saw and move it down the ramp and he assembled the mobile base. As you'll see, the video is still available online. He assembled a mobile base on the saw with it leaning over quite a bit. There were a couple of other interesting solutions that, showing people unloading it as well. Um, Charles Coolidge, who's here locally in the Northwest, Seattle area, I think he's on the east side, um, showed using a shop engine hoist. He took the legs off of it and put it in the, or secured it in the bucket of an FEL front end loader on his small Scud subcompact utility tractor, and he used his tractor to lift it up and then lower it onto his mobile base solution. He didn't show the counterweighting that he must have used because the saw is heavy and I think it would have been enough to tip his tractor without a counterweight, but I'm sure he did that. Um, then also David Pugh, I think he's down in the LA area, but I'm not absolutely sure of that. Uh, uh, he rigged up a hoist system. He was lucky enough to somehow get it in the shop in the crate, still on its pallets, and he rigged up a hoist system that he bolted to the ceiling of his large garage slash shop and then got the help of two or three guys, and they used a block and tackle to lift it. And I was thinking about something along those lines initially, and it wasn't clear from the sales literature whether or not the lifting ring comes with the saw. It does. So I ended up with two. I ordered one of those just in case I went in that direction. Um, Eventually decided not to do that, but it does come with a lifting ring. So if you're lucky enough to have a hoist solution, you can just pick it up and then lower it onto your mobile base that way. But for me, I was going to be outside in front of the shop. I didn't have any of that equipment. And I didn't want to go to the trouble of building an outdoor hoist system, which, I went through the process of figuring out what that would take and decided uh, there must be something else I could do that would be a lot more direct and simple. Um, and it really came down to the design of the mobile base. So I decided to design and build a new mobile base for the saw. About 10 years ago, I was fortunate enough to catch a local Craigslist ad. Somebody was selling a group of five mobile bases. They were all various Delta models down in Tacoma. And I think they were clearing out of stores, remaining inventory or something. Um, this was about the time Delta was dying as a major brand of shop equipment. So anyway, I bought all 5 mobile bases, and I happened to have one of those that was designed for a Delta contractor saw. And I decided to cut that apart and resize it and use it with some design variations for my purposes. So the requirements I set up for the mobile base and for uncrating are as follows. One person with modest strength, an older guy like me, has to be able to do the job safely by themselves. You have to be able to uncrate it, get it onto its mobile base by yourself. No help. Um, Two, when the saw is in use, it needs to be resting on uh, some rubber elevator bolts or on its frame, not on wheels. I want the thing to be safely on the floor when the saw is in use. All, with not even 2 wheels in back, uh, partially elevated. Put the whole thing on the floor. Um, Three, the mobile base must provide the means of moving the saw safely off the pallets. So somehow the design of the mobile base must facilitate uh, its installation and lowering the saw. It's an interesting. Uh, Four, installation must be reasonably fast. You'll want to take a couple of days to do this. In fact, it ended up taking me about 3 hours, and part of that was in the dark, and it started to rain on me. So, but I was able to do it very safely. The total weight I ended up lifting at any one time was probably 10, 15 pounds. It wasn't much. The lifting effort was very trivial. It was more work pushing it once I got it down on all 4 wheels um, than it was actually lowering it. And so we'll go through how I accomplish that. And finally, the mobile base itself needs to fit the base of the saw without any gaps around the side. I didn't want something that was going to collect dust. And I didn't want to put any shims in there. And as you'll see, every mobile base, first of all, Powermatic or the the company that owns Powermatic, uh, Powermatic brand, does not make a mobile base specifically for this saw. There is not one specifically fitted to its base. So there are a lot of mobile bases that are adjustable in size that people have tried. And I reviewed every one of those before deciding to try and build my own. And I had serious issues with every one of them. And one of them, common one is they have bolts that go through the sides with extension rails, and that automatically spaces the side of the base of the saw away from those rails by however much of the bolt sticks out. And to me, that was unacceptable. I wanted it to fit. So, um, 3 common mobile bases that have this issue of the gaps are the Bora, the HTC, and the one Rockler sells. That and I just said no, we can't go there. So those were the requirements. Um, One person has to be able to do it with modest strength. When the saw is in use, it has to be resting on the ground and not on any wheels. The mobile base has to provide the means of getting it off the pallets and onto itself, and have to be able to do it reasonably quickly, and no gaps or shims. So let's look at the solution. Let's go over the concept first of what we're going to do. And probably the best place to start is to correct one of the flaws I think that the manual suffers from, which is probably due to American market resistance to the metric system. This is a metric saw. People who designed it, the engineers who designed it, thought and worked in metric system. The manufacturing engineers that implemented the tooling and set up the production facility to implement those designs, they thought and worked in the metric system. This is a metric saw. Every last aspect of it is metric. And unfortunately, in the manual, um, the tech writers have catered to that a little, the American bias for the English system of measurements a little too much. And um, in it, anytime you see a reference to a measurement or characteristic of the saw that's rendered in English units, rest assured it's wrong. It's a sloppy conversion. They don't use decimal inches with a decimal. They use the nearest fraction that somebody thought would be convenient. So they're all wrong. And if you're trying to do something with the saw that requires accuracy, um, that involves some measured attribute of the saw, then you need to start work. You need to work in a metric system. And if we're going to build a mobile base, we have to craft it to exactly fit the base snugly. And the dimensions provided, one of the videos, I forget which one, that's online where somebody reviewing saw had contacted JPW, which is the name of the company that owns the Powermatic brand, which is owned by a private equity firm in New York. But anyway, they contacted JPW and asked for the dimensions of the base so they could go shopping for an appropriate mobile base. And the dimensions they got, and which are included in the video, are wrong. They're close, but they're not quite right. So if you want to build one that's not going to accumulate dust between the sides of the edges of the base and your mobile base, then you got to ignore that and get the correct dimensions. And I will include those in the comment section below the video. So that's the first thing. The manual, it's an okay manual as manuals go. I think tech writing was better 30, 40 years ago, but it's not awful. But it has some flaws, as most tech manuals do. And that usually comes down to communications issues between the tech writer and the engineer. And it's usually the engineer's fault for not being adequately patient. So what's the concept here? Well, there are two key components that are going to enable us to take the saw that's sitting on the crate, pull out the 4 bolts that hold it to the smaller pallet that it will be on once you get the crate off. And start getting a mobile base up. Two things that are critical to this are these rod lap casters. They're designed to be added to a heavy bench. You see them advertised for being putting on a heavy workbench. But I've seen videos and pictures of people buying them for all sorts of heavy things. Anytime we want the caster to be fully retractable, a set of 4 of these will accomplish that. So these are great. Also, the weight of the saw is not evenly distributed on the base. The preponderance of it is over here on the operator's side. So the bulk of the weight is going to be on the 2 casters that are on this side. You need the heaviest duty ones you can get. I think the heaviest ones Ron Lamp has are rated at just over 900 pounds for the set of four, which gives you in excess of 200 pounds rating for um, the two on this side, or 200 pounds each, and it's just enough. You want the heaviest set that you can get. So, and these casters are designed to be bolted sideways into the side of a bench leg, and people use them for all sorts of things. So all we need to do is recraft the mobile base so that we can bolt these onto the side in the appropriate position, and have the mobile base be in four parts so that we can put it on. That's fairly standard. Uh, and then while it's on the still on the pallet, before we put the wheels on, before we bolt these onto the brackets that have been prepared to receive them, another key component is going to be a pair of 4 or 5 foot 2x2 angle lines, 2x2, uh, 1/8 inch thick, or maybe even a little bit lighter than that will do. And when you do your dry run pre-assembly, um, line up and make some holes in the angle irons such that they can bolt on and extend beyond the sides of the pallets. So you have these two beams sticking out on either side. And then the idea is that we get a lever. I used a 24-inch long crowbar, padded it gently so it wouldn't scratch the paint, uh, and pried up the uh, the uh, the saw up a little bit above the pallet and shimmed it. And I just used some thin blocks of wood. In fact, I cut them out of the crate. I broke the crate down once it was off the saw, took it over to the table, took the pieces over to the table saw, and zipped out a whole bunch of little square shims that are the thickness of the crating material, which is 3/8 or a little less. And need a stack of those, at least 20, and I think I zipped off about 40 of them and supplemented with some 2x4 blocks. But initially, I just put a couple of those to shim up the saw so I could slide the mobile base under the saw. And yeah, pry bar was very easy. I mean, again, I think I might have had to apply 15 pounds of pressure or so, but it wasn't much. Just to nudge it up, 1/4 inch or whatever the thickness of the shims are, get that under, install the sides and frames, and then lower. They assemble the frame of your mobile base while it's on those shims. Then you're ready for the next step, which is out the ends of your uh, angle irons that you touch. Once again, build a stack of blocks made up of little thin pieces. Now, the lower part, the lower half, can be a 4x4 block because you've got some height that you're going to have initially from the pallets, and you can just have that take up half your space, and at some point you get down low enough, pull out the 4x4, put back in a sufficient stack of your little shims. And the idea is what we're going to do is one shim at a time, going around the saw, lift an end, pull out a shim, go to the next station, lift the saw, and you're only lifting 1/8 of an inch, if that, just enough to pull out one shim. Just go round and round and round until you're on the ground. And easy peasy, just like that. Once it's on the ground, bolt on your wheels, stop, stop down to raise the saw, and wheel it inside. It never leans over more than maybe a degree or two, not much. I mean, when you pry for your shims, it goes over a little bit, but That's the concept, is to have the mobile base designed around these fully retractable rod lap wheels, rod lap casters. Leave them off until you're on the ground and then put them back on. And the design of the actual mobile base to implement this, we'll get into some nice little details that'll make that easier. But that's the concept. The idea is such that you just lower it a tiny little bit at a time, going around the saw until it's done. And like I said, I did it all by myself. There was no lifting, no straining. The saw didn't lean a whole lot. It was never at risk. Um, it was still covered with the plastic that it was shipped in, so it was protected from the elements, and I didn't take any of that off until it got inside. Um, I did pull boxes that were loose around it and brought them in first, but it was very easy to do. But the secret is the Ron Lap casters, bench casters, and a couple lengths of angle iron, a stack of shims for each of the four corners, and you're good to go. Very quickly, let me explain how I built the mobile base to meet all that criteria, and which enabled me to very easily unload it by myself. Again, I was only lifting 15 pounds or so at most on the end of the angle iron as I was going around and around, removing one shim at a time. The saw never leaned over more than maybe a degree or two at most. It was never at risk. It was perfectly safe and it was easy. Took a little time, but that's all right. Better take a little time than risk. So what I did is I got that Delta contractor saw mobile base that I had sitting around and cut it apart. I had taken a welding class, and by the way, I recommend for woodworkers. I'm not a metal worker. Woodworking's my thing. In fact, my interest is really wooden clocks. I've been working toward being able to make some wooden geared clocks, which is why I got this. I want to be able to do some really nice hardwood resawing to make the materials for the gears. So, and what but welding comes up every once in a while. There's something around the shop that would be nice if I could just get in and repair something or whatever. So about 15 years ago, I took uh, an introductory welding class using MIG technology at a local community college. A couple of days a week, I'd go up there after work. When I finished the class, my wife bought me a nice Miller MIG machine for my birthday, and it's come in incredibly handy. And so I used it this time to put once I cut the pieces to length and had it cut out to assemble this mobile base to the specs I needed. I wanted to make sure that the Ron Lap casters were not over here on the operator side, and that they were well clear of this of the brake pedal for stopping the blade. I did not, if you're in a hurry and you want to get your foot on that blade, you don't want to be hitting anything. So I wanted to make sure that this area was well clear. So I made these brackets to space them out, and also over toward the washer stack for the bolts as close as I could. I ended up overlapping the rails such that it's the end rails here um, that overlap, and I guess that you would call those the rails, and this is stiles using woodworking terminology, but they're just it's 1 by 2 inch, 1 inch by 2 inch steel tube that the Delta mobile base was made of, and I just cut them to the size I needed. The exact length of the base is 640 millimeters. And I welded on some end caps with the 3/8 16 nuts on the inside. Um, And so they were a couple millimeters short of that 640, so that the end rails would end up being flush as well. Okay, and then I spaced them so that when the washers went on through these rails, that they would not stick up or out the end. So got them nice and centered, and I spaced as close to them as I could, but keeping the washer so it wouldn't stick up. Um, and so the width of the saw base is exactly 450 millimeters. And so I had to add enough extra length to these end tubes um, to allow me to get my bolt holes lined up exactly with the nuts that I had put on the end caps in these side rails and the stiles. And the length of that and what you care about is the spacing. So when you're lining up these bolt holes, you want to make sure that the gap between these two rails ends up being exactly that 450 millimeters. But you can work in English measurements for the tube length on this one. And I ended up about 19 3/4 inches once the capsule. Used 3/8 16 bolts. I think they're about an inch and a quarter, inch and a half long, inch and a half long, I think. That gave me full use of all the threads in the nuts that were welded to those plates. The brackets for the rod lap, instead of putting a steel plate right up against the rail, which you could do, and then thread it, I ended up I had some 2-inch square steel tube that I cut these brackets out of, and so I spaced them out. Again, that made sure that this foot lever for the rod lap caster on this corner was well clear of that brake pedal. So that was it, pretty easy. I also put on some connector nuts. These are 1/2 inch 13 NC, which happen to be the thread size of the two elevator bolts that came off of the Delta Mobile base, and I got two more to match, and that way you can, when it's sitting down, you can make sure it's good and level on your concrete floor. I've never seen a concrete floor that was perfectly level, so it's good to have some nice elevator bolts when it's off the wheels. And that was it. Pretty easy. So let's move on to dust collection. Dust collection is really good on this saw if you set it up right. If you don't set it up right, it's might as well not be there. There was an article in Popular Woodworking that reviewed this saw not long after it came out. And there was a photograph with that article that showed this particular adapter. And it's the only place I've seen it pictured. And I looked high and low. It took me several hours of searching to find this. And this adapter really is the key to being able to set this up right. The reason it's so hard to find is that the manufacturer uses their own name for it instead of standard plumbing nomenclature. In plumbing nomenclature, you would call this a true Y, spelled either TRU or TRUE, WYE, and it's a 4x4x5 or 5x4x4, however you want to designate it, but it's called a true Y. The company that made this didn't call it that. It's Bighorn, and they call it a Y adapter, and that really makes it hard to find. But I'll put a link to it. It turns out that true Ys from the plumbing trade in this size, one, they're big and bulky, way overkill for what you need, and they cost a couple $100 a piece. Whereas this was, I think, $8 or $9 when I bought it from Acme. Very inexpensive, and I'll put a link to it. Uh, it- Once you have this, then it's just a matter of making sure you set this up so you've got good smooth flow. I've got the saw turned and there's a little bit more of a bend here than I like, but its normal position is back around the way you saw it in the first part of the video. Um, you want to make sure that you're getting really good flow out of this upper uh, dust collection adapter. And so it's a 4 inch. If you connect a 4 inch, you're good. And then obviously you've got two 4 inchers. So whatever this is needs to be larger. And it turns out that 5 is just about right. Back in the early days of YouTube, there was a young woman that did a video in her shop, and she did an extensive review of various tests she did of the effectiveness of various dust collection hose sizes hooked up to her cyclone machine. She had a wall-mounted unit, and she tested a variety of configurations. Had a meter and checked the throughput, and she came to the unmistakable conclusion that if you've got one of the common cyclone adapter dust collection machines, and we'll go over to mine in a minute. Uh, you really want to have 6 inch ductwork or hoses coming out of it, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then what I've got is I've got a 6 inch distribution system up above in the rafters here in the shop. And for most of the locations, I dropped down to 4 inches and then just have a single 4 inch hose for the table saw and the lathe and so on. But for this, I went to 5 inches coming out of the 6 inch, have it splash gate up there, and got this. So bighorn Y adapter is what you want. Get that, and you're good to go. Okay, just briefly on hooking up your Cyclone to a system for supporting multiple tools. This isn't about the bandsaw in particular. It applies to anything, but I thought I'd throw it in here as people might be interested. I happen to get the Powermatic PM1500 and modified it a little bit to make it easier to use or more convenient to use in my shop. Um, One of the challenges with the way it comes from the factory, this particular unit, is the control unit is bolted low and fixed so it's just straight out, and it uses infrared technology for its remote controls. And they have it has a sensitivity limitation, and I'm thinking about a 30-degree cone of sensitivity that comes out from it, which is fine for my table saw position, which is off in this direction, but the bandsaw is over there, and with it fixed in that position, one, it was too low. Anything would be in the shop in this open bay here. If I had some another tool or something else pulled in here, canoe or something, it would block it. So I needed to raise it, and I wanted to angle it such that it split the difference, so I could use a remote from either location. And I've got a couple extra remotes so I could turn it on and off from any place in the shop. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that the cyclone units that come like this, and I don't think this applies to the wall mount units, but it definitely applies to the ones that are on these wheeled bases. They often come with one of these Y adapters that's screwed onto their input flange. These really sabotage what these dust collection units can do. It has a pair of 4 inches, and I suppose if you were using it with just one tool right next to it, it would be fine. But if you're going to use it uh, to do dust collection through the whole shop, through some sort of a plenum system, you want 6 inch hosing. You just gotta go to 6 inch. And it just so happens this flange is just the right size for 6 inch hoses. So I got the one that Rockler sells and the clamps and put it on there and that's just fine. And build a new mounting adapter for this. Again, that welding class came in really handy and made it so the angle of it is adjustable so I could aim it just right. And once that was done, it was really good. And all I have to do is adjust the blast gates and I'm good to go from any position in the shop. So I hope that's helped. Okay, so if you're considering this saw and are looking at YouTube videos on it, I'm sure you've come across Marty Bake's very fine video. He did an extensive review of it. I must have watched it 4 or 5 times as I was trying to understand what this was about before I purchased it. Couldn't thank Marty enough. Uh, he made some complaints about the saw, some observations, and I wanted to see if I could address them and dig into them. Uh, and although I think his several issues, I was only able to fix or dig into a couple of them satisfactorily. I think I can explain what some of the others are. A couple of things he complained about were the plastic locking levers on the table lock, and down low there's another one here on the motor position lock for tensioning the belt. Um, yes, they're made with plastic. And yes, they're ratcheting. I went to the trouble of digging into the nature of this ratchet, and to try and see if I could come up with some metal ones. I even bought a couple. It turns out that the ratchet mechanism inside these is not any kind of a standardized design. There must be 100 of them on the market. And so finding some metal levers that happen to match this particular ratchet mechanism, you're just not going to do it. If you want to get rid of the plastic levers, about the only way would be to custom fabricate a whole new locking system, and that was too much effort. I wasn't going to go there. Another one of Marty's complaints was the plastic on this particular knob, which is you turn it as part of the tilt mechanism. Um, you could redo this, but this knob is actually molded onto its shaft. Quite a few of the Powermatic tools have adjustment knobs or locking knobs of various sorts that are like this. It shows up on drill press, planer. Um, those are two places where I've seen it. And that's just the way they go about this. Yes, you could replace it, but it would mean somehow grinding off this plastic knob that's molded onto the shaft and then reworking the end of the shaft to with splines or a keyway or something, a flat spot, and then getting a knob of the appropriate specifications to fit whatever you've done and put it back on there. Again, I decided that was too much effort, so decided to leave it as it was. Um, let's go upstairs and look at the other side. Okay, let's address some of the issues that were up in this area. Again, I want to thank Marty Baki from down in California. Uh, his review of this saw was incredibly useful. One of the things Marty complained about is that when he received his saw, the scale here on the fence rail was put on crooked, and he found that very annoying. When I got mine, it was on perfectly square, and it was easy to line up with the fence in one position, not both. The scale, which is metric on one side and English units on the other, uh, precludes the possibility of having uh, one of the scales devoted to the fence in the alternate position. I suppose you could order through parts another one of these scales, mount it over a little bit, uh, and hopefully you'd be able to see it through um, the lens here with its magnifier, at least enough such that you could see it. But you, I think the reality is that you just have to choose which position you want your fence in and line up on that. Another item he complained about uh, was the table locking pin that locks this gap that's there for changing the blade. Is his pin was not properly assembled relative to the little cable bail. Mine came, the design has actually changed a little bit from his, and it's very nice. So it works very well. I suspect somebody listened to his video and addressed that issue. Another item that Marty complained about is these end caps, that they were too small and they fall out easily. These end caps, they might as well not have bothered. I totally agree with him. They're literally junk. They fall out. I mean, just barely tap them and they fall out. On top of that, on one end, on mine it was the left end, a hole was drilled, not on the right, but one hole was drilled so that if you had a cap that was long enough, you could put a screw in there and lock it in place. So what I did is I got on eBay and found some caps that have a longer insert that goes into the end of the tube. The tube is a 30 millimeter by 60 millimeter steel tube. So that's what you want to look for, 30 by 60. Um, and get some end caps. Unfortunately, I had to buy 10 or 12 of them to get the two I needed. But you can see they're quite a bit longer. Uh, well, not quite a bit, but they're enough longer that they reach that hole for locking. I drilled another hole, put them on, and my caps are staying on quite nicely, so no problem. They also fit very tight, whereas the ones that came with it um, were just loose. They didn't have any locking rings. So that's those issues. Again, thanks to Marty for his fine review. The final thing that I want to talk about on this saw is the alignment of the blade on the wheel and the difference in opinion that you run into in the literature and in videos. Um, the manual that comes with this saw says to center the blade. By the way, the blade that comes with the saw is a 10 millimeter blade, not a 3/8. It's close to 3/8, but it's a 10 millimeter blade. Uh, the blade that what it says in the manual is to center the blade on the wheel. So you have a nice little window for working on the tracking, and you set that up. Alex Snodgrass in his videos and books, he talks about centering the bottom of the gullet of the teeth on the center of the blade so that the 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 tips of the teeth aren't getting a twisting or torquing motion into the left, which if you were centering on and pushing the blade, the gullet out toward you, toward the operator, they would have a tendency to torque left a little bit. And that would make resawing against the fence darn near impossible. You would have a built-in drift, which Alex makes a point of. I think he's right. Um, But the issue really only applies to blades that are of a size range, probably this 10 millimeter or 3/8, and a little bit larger than that, maybe up to half an inch, where that would make a difference. On very small blades, um, it's not going to matter because you're going to be so close to the center of the wheel with the bottom of the gullet, you wouldn't notice it anyway. So that just leaves very wide resaw blades. I think Alex doesn't say this, but I think he would agree. Um, for very wide resaw blades, you don't need to worry about that torque factor. The rest of the blade is big enough and strong enough that it would stabilize it, and you wouldn't have that as an issue. So that I think reconciles those two stories and brings them together. They're not perfectly at odds with each other, but when you read them and you listen to Alex and read his materials and you read a lot of other stuff, it sounds like there's a disagreement, and I don't think there is. I think, um, except in that very narrow range, and in that case, I would take Alex's advice. Uh, that's all. Again, I'd like to thank the other reviewers. They were incredibly helpful. I hope what I've added has been useful, and hope to see you back here when we're talking about wooden gears or technology or something else. Thank you.